This video is going to be very useful for those guys who may be looking to start a relationship with a Filipina or those new to dating a Filipina. This information is a must to potentially keep you out of jail in the Philippines. Now, I get rather concerned when I speak to foreign guys who, when I ask the question, do they understand the laws around separation, divorce and adultery in the Philippines, they say that they have no idea. You see, many foreign guys seem to think, for at least the most part, that the laws they're used to in their country will be similar or the same in other countries. Or perhaps they just don't consider what the differences would be. This, of course, can be a very dangerous thing to do when we're looking to be in a relationship with a Filipina when we're in the Philippines, either to live as an expat or to visit our girlfriend for a few weeks. One must realise that before we go to any country worldwide, we need to understand what the laws of the land are, because when we're there, ignorance is no excuse, and certainly saying their laws are stupid won't cut it in that country. So when a guy is thinking about dating a woman in the Philippines, he needs to fully comprehend the laws around a Filipina's marital status and how adultery laws work in the Philippines. Now, I want to point out here that I'm no lawyer. But what I give you here will be the basic information on how things work in the Philippines around this very important topic. So as I say, this information will be vital for all new players to dating a Filipina. And I know most of you who have been in a relationship with a Filipina for some time would be very aware of what I have to say right here. But your input in the comments can help to create a wealth of information for all new guys. So let's start off by talking about divorce in the Philippines. And simply, in most cases, there is no such thing. The Philippines is a highly religious country and is heavily influenced by the Catholic Church. And as such, divorce is not an option for a Filipina and a Filipino couple at this time. So even if the couple have been separated for 30 years, they're still considered married in the eyes of the law unless they've been to court and achieved an annulment. Now, one must be aware that annulments aren't as easy to get as some people may think, and certainly they're not always guaranteed to be granted. It can take several years to be heard in court and can cost up to $5,000 or $6,000 depending on the lawyers and the complexity of the case. Right here, some Filipinas may try and tell you that she's separated from her husband and make it sound like it's all okay to have a physical relationship with her when in the Philippines. But if she's never had an annulment, this can land you in jail for up to 6 years. Having said this, there are a few other ways that you can legally have a relationship in the Philippines with a Filipina who has been married. If she was previously married to a foreign man in his country and the divorce was granted in that man's country, then the Filipina can apply to have the divorce recognised in the Philippines. And if granted, she will then be able to legally remarry. For instance, if she's widowed, then she'll be free to remarry. If she was married under Muslim or Sharia law in the Philippines, she can then apply to have the marriage dissolved, and if granted, she'll also be free to remarry. Now, some guys may think, well, that's no problem if she's still classed as married in the eyes of the Philippines government, and they'll just not marry her. They may intend on living in the Philippines with her and go about life that way. Well, sorry to tell you, that's where you could land yourself in prison, and one really doesn't want to risk ending up in a Filipino jail. In the Philippines, they do take adultery laws rather seriously. And the woman and the man in such a relationship who commit adultery can both spend some years in jail if found guilty. Now granted, many such couples get away with being in an adulterous relationship together, but every now and then we do hear of foreign men who do get charged. What can happen is a jealous husband who now sees his wife with a foreign guy who he naturally thinks is rich, decides to get even with his wife and may file a complaint against the wife and the boyfriend. When a complaint is filed, the police will naturally follow it up to see if any charges are warranted, and if they charge you, then you'll be thrown into a Filipino jail. Whilst there, you'll be awaiting your trial, which could take a couple of years before you even get found guilty or not guilty, and truly, I wouldn't wish that on anyone. Now, the other thing that the husband may try and do is to blackmail you into getting some quick cash. He may see this as a perfect opportunity, even though he doesn't care about his wife any longer. In his mind, he may never actually intend on filing a complaint, with his main goal being to get a large amount of money from you to improve his life. But for the foreign guy, he may not want to take such a risk and would be understandably frightened, and so many will just pay up the money. So now you see why it's so important to know these laws and to understand how you must be aware of the truth around your Filipina's legal marital status. Now for sure, in the early stages we can simply ask her, but the wording here is so important. Always ask her, have you ever been married, as opposed to, are you married? In the Filipina's eyes, she hasn't been with her husband for years, and so she may say she's not married, when in fact, she is under the laws of her country. When you ask her the question, has she ever been married, this makes it clear of what you're asking of her, but still, you'll need to get more solid confirmation before you go to the Philippines to be with her. The way we do this is by getting a recent Senemar, which is a certificate of no marriage in the Philippines. And yes, be sure that it's a recent one and not years old. It costs less than $10 for your Filipina to either go online or directly to the Philippine Statistics Authority to fill out the paperwork, and she will have the Senemar back within a couple of weeks. I'll put a link in the description to the PSA site. Now, for those of you who may be a little less trusting, when you go to the Philippines, you may go with her yourself to lodge the paperwork, so you know 100% it's all legitimate. But if you do it this way, then be sure not to have any physical relationships with the Filipina until you get confirmation of her marital status, is my best advice here. Clearly, when we look at the laws in the Philippines, it's much safer and probably wiser to really focus in on a Filipina who's never been married. I've spoken to many guys who fell for a married Filipina, and it really makes their life and the relationship so much harder. Some of these guys had the idea in their head that they'll just pay for an annulment and bam, all will be good. Until the annulment wasn't approved, or they may have found out to get it approved, they needed to offer up some extra cash, let's just say. Now, I know there are many wonderful married Filipinas out there, but when it comes to the risks and headaches involved, you need to ask yourself, is it worth it? Simply, you can avoid the extra stress and complications by ensuring you find a Filipina who's never been married. So now you have this vital information to where you can make a fully informed choice and not be hit with the surprise factor later on. What will you do? Be sure to leave your comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.